Broadcasting Network TV, aka LCBN TV, is committed to bringing the transformation message of Jesus Christ into homes across the world, providing hope in the most desperate situations. We are passionate about souls, reaching the lost, the hurt, and the lonely. And by a click of a button, God can change a person's life forever. Watch LCBN TV channel 24/7 on UK Freeview channel 271, Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, Android TV, Apple TV, See Love World, Google TV, LCBNTV.com, LifeComTV.com. Download LCBN TV app from Google Play and App Store. LCBN TV, just in time.
Hello and good evening and welcome to LCBN TV. I'm Rev Faith. Thank you for joining us this evening on Roundtable Talks. We're continuing our discussion on gospel music with a few of the experts in the field in the UK. And I hope that you're really going to enjoy this evening discussion. Please remember to share to your friends and family and anyone who is interested in gospel music and Black music generally. Today, we are talking about gospel music and racial injustices. How can we make sure that gospel music, which has a voice for the Black community, transcends systemic racism in the UK, and how can we improve our audiences and our presence within the music industry? Today, the question and the theme that we are discussing is what on earth is UK gospel? And today with me, I have Steve Alexander Smith, Sandra Godley, Wisdom, Lady T, two more guests who will be joining us later today and who are able to join us, who will be joining us in a minute. Today, everybody, how are you all doing?
Good, thank you.
Fine. Doing good, thank you. Fantastic.
Well, it's exciting to have you on the show this evening. And I want to start with Steve. Steve, you have written a book about British gospel, British Black gospel, the foundation of, and looking at the book and the history and the research that you have made, I wanted to ask you the question: do you think that UK, looking at your research, I would like to find out from you, what was the background and how did UK gospel come together?
My background, well, the background of the book goes back a long way. I started writing this book. I think I mentally wrote this book back in the 80s, but finally got my act together in the noughties, 2009, and it's done well. Now, I needed to focus the contribution of Black culture in this country to gospel music. Now, if you're asking the question when the term UK gospel came about, as far as my research is concerned, it came about when when we stopped being overly impressed, no disrespect to the Americans. In the 70s, you had a ton of American gospel artists performing in this country. Andre Crouch, a lot of the top singers, for example, Danny Bell. Mm-hmm. And it got to the point where we were probably giving them a bit too much respect. Now, around that time, we had first generation Afro-Caribbeans growing up in this country. And it was around the early 1980s that you got the likes of London Community Gospel Choir, Paradise, gospel funk band, that started to push out music that identified with gospel in Britain, hence UK gospel. The term, I can't actually say there was a moment or a time or an event where we said, right, we're going to introduce the term UK gospel. No, it's one of these things that probably just came about with time. Just like you had the spirituals fusing into gospel on the American side of things. It was a term that came about gradually. So I hope that answers your questions in terms of the UK gospel as a terminology. So in the early 1980s, as far as my research goes back, yeah.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much for that. I'm going to go to Bazil, who has joined us, director of LCGC Choir. Welcome and good evening, Bazil.
Hi there, Faith.
Hello.
Greetings to everybody in this platform.
Oh, thanks to have you back again on this show. Bazil, with your experience of Black gospel music, you have been on the scene for a while. From what we know, the term Black gospel music was what started what we have today as UK gospel. Do you know why the change was made?
You mean the change from the name or
the name Black gospel music to UK gospel?
Yeah. Well, I think primarily no one can argue that our influences and influencers are from the United States. They are brothers and sisters who look like us. The story, the whole history of Black, as we call American Black gospel music, came through the stories of the slave, the spirituals, the Negro spirituals. And so it grew down through the years. It changed from where it first began into those very sad songs, those songs that were written by people who were living under the slave master. Their lives were similar to the animals that they looked after. But the music has changed down through the years. And it is that identity, that story can only be told by former slaves, really in its truth, its truest form, because it's the story, it's the legacy, it's our legacy. And so I think the term Black gospel sits nicely upon it because it's a truth. It's just the gospel, it's the story of truth, the revelation, freedom. And that is where the name is. But in terms of what we do here in the United Kingdom, I think when gospel really kicked into the place that really saw it being so energized, as Steve was saying, Paradise, there was Clarity, there was the New Jerusalem Choir, London Community Gospel Choir, Angelical Voices, and many more, Echoes of Joy. There are many more groups around at the time who were singing. I mean, Echoes of Joy, I believe they were reggae based. So their gospel was being carried by the reggae style of music, which to me is right, is what we should be doing. It's predominantly a Jamaican style of music, and the churches where it was being sung and performed were predominantly Jamaican, so they were being true to their culture. And in some cases, people were saying this was not right, and it was part of the whole programming of our slave mentality. Anything that we do or we create is wrong. That I am against. So Black gospel has all those faces on it. As I said before, there were churches where predominantly many of the people came from the smaller islands, where calypso and soca was a style, dominant style of music, Barbados and places like that. So we went those churches and you heard this calypso and the soca style music in worship. Again, you know, being true to ourselves, using the culture, the music for our culture to express our faith. And in there, you went to the African-led churches. I prefer to hearing the Afrobeat type music because it's cultural.
But what I want to point out today in this discussion is today we're calling our music, or what Christian music is being produced by the Black community in the UK as UK gospel, and we've dropped the name or the adjective of Black to the music. And I'm trying to understand from those who have been in the scene before, why was the term Black removed from the definition of the music we produce? And can I go to Sandra?
Over the years, the message of good news from the Bible has had to burst out of the church walls. And I think when you sing gospel music to your fellow Christian brothers and sisters, it makes sense. It's a message that we are repeating and regurgitating and exalting to one another, and that's good. I think that it had to adjust itself once it's come out of those church walls. And so the term just gospel music is something that a lot of artists use and practice and want to be part of because they like the good news of how it makes you feel. So that's a separate thing. But the UK gospel aspect, which is what you've asked me about, I think that's us demarcating our own brand or trying to create our own sound in the space that exists for us now. And I think there has been some confusion because so much of what we try and demonstrate as UK artists does come from that American feel and vibe. I mean, I'm signed to an American label. That's where most of my business comes through. So I think that's kind of the answer. And moving forward, what will gospel sound and look like in the future? And have we spent enough time creating our own sound in the UK to actually make sure that it gets transported across the world? I'm very much passionate about sitting down with other like-minded people on this show now and saying, what makes UK gospel unique? Well, there are lots of things: our backgrounds, our heritage, the way we speak, our sound, our history. And I think if we spent more time defining what makes UK different to America or any other country, we can legitimately call it UK gospel, knowing that it's different to everything else, but it has its own, it has its place in history, but it has its own unique DNA. I hope I've described that.
Yeah. So, Lady T, I'm going to go to you now. You know, as an radio presenter, we've had an opportunity to listen to a huge amount of music and sound coming from the UK, whether it was from the African wing of gospel or the UK gospel itself on the Caribbean side. What do you think is UK gospel today? What does it sound like? How can it be defined? What are the characteristics?
I think what is UK gospel today? I think UK gospel is it's each individual artist. Their sound, it's what they choose to create, and the creativity that they put in their music. It's so diverse. I mean, when I used to hear music, I never knew what I was going to be getting, because sometimes I think if I'm listening to a certain artist, I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to get this style from them, but then in the song they'll flip that completely because they want to do something different. And I think one of the things I do like about UK gospel artists is that they're very experimental when it comes to sounds. They do I guess pay homage to the old sounds, the classic gospels from way back, but now it's more like they can either infuse old style gospel to the new sound of what's happening right now. So whether it be the hard tripping all the way to if it's just the guitar, if it's just the Afro pop, Afro beat style. So it's changing, and I think I like the fact that they're, like I said, they're very experimental, and the sound is great. I enjoy the sound, and I always want to hear something different. And I know there was a period where I was just really upset because UK was starting to sound like America. Artists were starting to, make songs like the Americans, sound like them. And it's like, no, we don't want you to sound like them. Do your own thing, whatever kind of like sound that you can dream of with your producer. Let that happen. That's distinctive. Let it not be like the Americans. Let it be your thing. Let it be like a UK sound. But yeah, the UK sound it's a melting pot of different styles and great creativity. So yeah, changing.
Yes, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm going to Wisdom. I was sorry if I cut you through this. I was going to go to Wisdom because Wisdom, you have been involved with a genre or a subtype of music that is an offshoot of UK gospel, which is hip hop gospel or hip hop Christian music. And this is where I'm now finding it difficult to look at that genre and say hip hop and reggae come under the same label as Black gospel as a whole umbrella. So what's your view on that?
I think it's interesting because we came in a slightly different way. I didn't grow up from a Christian background, so I literally came to Christ with what was on my gang, essentially, and went from being in Wu-Tang hip hop concerts to being dancing at the front at Fred Hammond concerts, which was a music that I had never had any connection to, and it was a really big transition for me. And actually, Green Jade grew out of the fact that we realized we still had a love for hip hop, we had a love for our faith, and actually we just started making our own songs over instrumentals of hip hop because we just needed some music for ourselves, and we weren't accustomed to the sound of gospel. So it was always a little bit of a tricky thing for us because we were a hip hop group before we were Christian. So we existed in the mainstream world, if you like, before we existed within a Christian context. But obviously our faith and the content of our music changed dramatically. So we always wrestled with what exactly gospel was, because what we found over the years was that we found that Black audiences saw anything that had any Christian content in it as gospel. White audiences saw anything that was Black and Christian as gospel. And the mainstream generally thought of choirs when they thought of gospel. So we didn't fit particularly well into any of those. So it was always kind of a struggle for us personally as to where do we fit within gospel. We're definitely of faith, and that's definitely where our music is coming from. But we didn't track that back necessarily to Mahalia Jackson, for example. That wasn't our inspiration. So for me, UK gospel was more about, definitely for me, from the mid-90s, it was that there was this sound that just was coming out. There was the Raymond & Co., there was Sinai's, there was us, there was Solid Rock, there was Gamma doing reggae. There was just this urban, for want of a better phrase, faith-based music coming out that was being supported by events like United by One and GL Live and a number of other events, which created this scene and this sound that mainly existed. Really, I was from me between 2000 to really 2010 was really it's a strong point for me, and that was the time that me and my friends often refer to as the golden age of UK gospel. In that was the time where we were popping off in various different places. You know, people like Green Jade were doing anti-gun crime stuff with the Mayor of London, now the Prime Minister, and we were getting into areas that under normal circumstances we hadn't been seen before. So that's when I think of UK gospel, that's what it means to me.
Steve, from your experience and your research on UK gospel, are you able to say what gospel music is when we look at the American gospel and then gospel music genre, and then when we're looking at the UK sound, which is what Wisdom just described now, which came out in the 2000s, which has its own sound and unique sound, which we could be calling something else than gospel because it has an R&B background. It's more, it has a Christian message, but it's not necessarily has the root of gospel itself as the American gospel. What do you think UK gospel today, and they're looking at the history that where it comes from, should it still carry the label of gospel?
Well, that's interesting because the very name gospel, Bazil mentioned the root of gospel. He mentioned the spirituals. Maybe gospel is just a euphemism. I was speaking to an artist today who describes her music as neo-gospel. She also describes it's more important that she expresses her music from a person who has faith. So certainly, I know when I did my research, I can only use one word to describe British gospel. It was eclectic. A CD comes from the book, and there were several styles of music under that one umbrella. There was calypso influenced, Afro beats. There was reggae. There was soul. There was R&B. So I also think we've got to move away from comparisons with the US. We're similar, but we're not identical.
Are we
we
still
can't.
comparing? I'm going to throw this at the panel. Are we still comparing ourselves to the US today in terms of what we are producing in the UK? And is this really the defining factor of what we're producing?
Some people like to think that there are some people who compare, and I hate when they do compare UK with US, because we're different and we are allowed to be different and we should be different. Like, yes, there might be some similarities, like you said, but to always compare all the time, it's really frustrating. It was really, for me, when I hear people say that, it is super frustrating. I'm like, let's not compare. Okay, US is a completely different market. It's a big market. Yes, we know that's where it started. Fine. But UK, we have our own. We have our own office. We have our own sound. We have things that we do here. Let's not compare them. The markets are completely different. The styles are different. There are some people who like the same thing that they do, you know, just to maybe get in there. But that whole comparison thing, I think it's tiring. I have to say, very, very tiring when I hear it. So we're definitely different. UK is definitely different, without a doubt.
Can I just add?
Bazil, just before you come in, because my question is, many people confuse the term gospel with the incl American gospel. So when people look at UK gospel, because it's called gospel, this automatically associated to the American gospel. That's one bit. The other one is, when we hear gospel, people say, well, it is Christian music and it's carrying the word of God. So therefore, it's carrying the message of the gospel. So it is gospel music. Which one today are we saying the UK music genre that we are producing is representing? Is it the one that carries the gospel message, or is it the one that really still has its root well grounded in the US gospel music genre, which we had? And I'll take that to Bazil.
I think it'd be difficult for majority of us who make gospel music in the UK to create a music that doesn't have some American influence in it, because we have all been influenced by that. That is the foundation we all began. Myself being a very excited, musician who depended on all forms of American music. I listened to gospel, soul, I listened to the rock and roll and all of that, and that because it all came from gospel music in the first place. I think we are still in the process of developing something that we can recognize as UK or British gospel. I think LCGC played a major part in influencing that, because I believe prior to that, most of the choirs in particular, and it was the choirs who were the flagship of gospel music in UK. It went into the rap and loads of many of different styles. You have Paradise, and at times LCGC can be quite funky and more like a soul group in its styling. But it's the attempt to try and find an original music or create music that is unique to us as a people. The story we tell through our music should be one that is British, Caribbean based, African based, because that is the population here. We're a mixture of all these different cultures. So our music, I believe, should be reflecting that. And that's where I think it's coming from. But I think some of the groups are still imitating, but there are others who are trying to write their own music. It's telling your own story primarily. I think it's very important. Can I just add as well? I listen to much of the American gospel. Now I listen to the quartets. They had their own styling, cordial movements. You listen to choirs from Chicago, you listen to the Mississippi Mass Choir, you listen to choirs from New York, and they all had their own styling, the way they move their chords around, their vocalizing. And I think it's something we've got to realize here. We might be looking for something that we say is specifically only British, but I think that would be difficult. But we still have a style that we will develop here that we recognize, like America, that is British gospel. But we have to be writing our own material and not covering other songs, other people's music.
You wanted to contribute to this one?
Yeah, I think for me, over the years recently, I would say one of the most exciting things that I've seen that's UK is the house gospel choir, which they perform inspirational house tracks as a choir, very much working in the mainstream world. And I think that for me is very uniquely UK. That both crosses over into a mainstream market and sort of breaks down the walls to some extent of gospel and really moves it forward. And I've been really excited to see things like that. Since I left, since my band came to an end, I kind of put myself into a position where I really wanted to step out of the gospel world so I could, and back into the mainstream music business, so I could see what were the things that were coming through. Who was it that people knew if you didn't know anything about gospel? And at the moment, it's very much Karen Gibson and Kingdom Choir. It's House Gospel Choir and Soul Sanctuary Choir are the ones that I hear about the most. That's from the choir side of things. But as artistry, there's a few here and there. But as I say, it's about, I think now there is a sound in the UK. And I think talking about having an impact in the mainstream, there's also the fact that we have to take into account that when I came into Christ, most churches did not like people listening to anything other than gospel music. So there was a real drive, or Christian-based music. There was a real drive for that music to be there. Now there is a much more relaxed attitude to it. So therefore, you know, kids will grow up listening to Stormzy, both bits of Blinded by Your Grace and whatever else it might very well be. And that change has meant that there is needing to be, and I think there is the beginnings of a real shift within what gospel means and the impact that it's having on the UK music market.
What I'd like to understand, because of all that we've spoken about, there is two trends that are coming through. One is we have a UK sound, and the other is, should it be called gospel? Because yes, American gospel has had influence on the music, and it is the root of where we're coming from. It did and used to represent the Black culture, and I think it still does. But now in the UK, we have our own expression of Black culture, UK style culture. We have our own sound of UK style culture. Why do we have to still label it gospel music, which has its own very distinct signature, its own musical classification? Why do we continue to put our music under that label? Sandra?
I think some of this is to do with fear, because there's a generation of people, particularly my parents and beyond, who have their own understanding of gospel and would see that it would be disrespectful not to call, you know, holy music, as it were, gospel. But we do need to move on. And it was good to hear Wisdom say something that really echoed in my heart. We have to look at what gospel music isn't doing at the moment. That's probably a better way of looking. And it's not changing the world. It isn't creating an appetite in our society for people to find out about God. So why is that? And often it's about language, it's about perception. And when we look and try and change our wordings and use words like inspirational music, which is what Wisdom said, but I said this at the last discussion, it starts to prick the ears of the listener, and they think, oh, okay. And maybe we need to break this down and think, well, is it more that we are projecting gospel inspired music, which is that it's from the basis of our spirituality, but actually to the outside world, outside of our church, we want to inspire you with our music, which resonates or should resonate with you. So our songs will talk about health and wealth and well-being and economics and the environment. And so that's where I feel our music should be going. I've said this for a long time. And if we stay within the church, regurgitating this amazing message to each other, that's great. We will be blessed by it, but actually the people outside the doors of those churches need to hear how gospel music can inspire them. So maybe we need to think about either changing the word gospel or adding other adjectives to it to help people understand this is how I feel we should be kind to society and not be so exclusive. And these may be tough words, but I'm looking at what hasn't worked in the past and now thinking, how long would it take for us to just sit down for a while and work out actually, what should we do for the people who really do need the message, the good news about who God is?
Thank you so much, Sandra. I have a message from Shabazz on YouTube who says, we have a problem. Gospel is the wrong term for our genre. It is the only genre that is labeled by lyrical content, not its sound. Is that correct, Lady T?
Again, I was a bit. Can you read that comment again, please?
Well, he says, the genre gospel is the wrong. Sorry, the term gospel is the wrong term for our genre in the UK, and it is the only genre which is labeled by its lyrical content and not its sound. In the sense that the lyrics contain the gospel or the word of God instead, and that's why it is called gospel. And I don't, Shabazz, I'll have to say that gospel music is not called gospel because it's carrying the word of God. I think it is a faith genre, and that we need to clear that in the air today. Gospel is a faith genre that has its own musical signature, and it is clearly well defined in America. What we're trying to find out today is what defines the UK Christian faith music that we produce, and should it continue to carry the message or the term gospel with it?
It should continue to carry. It should continue to carry the message. At the end of the day, the gospel is the word. It talks about freedom. It talks about, hope. It talks about love. That is the gospel of that's what the Bible is. It is gospel. That's the word. Everything else around it, everything around it is the genre. Do you know what I mean? The music part is the genre.
I'm gonna stop you because we've had this over and over the years, and for me, we have a lot of music that is produced in the world today, which has the message of Christ and is not called gospel. We've got CCM, which has the message of Christ, which is not gospel. We have contemporary R&B in the US, which is sometimes called gospel, sometimes it's not. We have the hip-hop Christian music. We have the reggae. We have the African Christian music, which is also coming along, and none of those carry the label gospel. Why is it that the UK wants to carry that gospel, that title, or that label to the music that we produce? Lady T, I think she's still answering that question.
But the Americans call it gospel music. I don't see what the difference is. They don't label it as. They have CCM. They have in different categories. On the charts or on the awards, they even have CCM. They have it Christian music. They have gospel music. I don't see why there's such a big issue about calling it gospel. Like, that's how it's always been for so many years. If the music part is what people need to be paying attention to, or sorry, not just the music, but the actual what people are saying in it. I'm always really like. Well, how do I explain it? I'm always really baffled when there's an issue about calling it gospel music, whereas even in Europe, it's called gospel music. Even in China, it's called gospel music. In America, it's called gospel music. So what's the problem?
Bazil,
what is the problem?
Wisdom wants
I don't understand.
I can speak a little bit on why is there a problem. In 2008, we Green Jay were doing a lot of schools work, and we just done an anti-gun crime schools tour in a set of schools in Tower Hamlets. Majority of Tower Hamlets, many of the schools have a high ratio of Muslims. We done a school where there were 100 kids in a classroom, was one black kid, and 99% of the rest of the class were Bangladeshi. And Guns Down was very much about social justice. It wasn't evangelical. And we got nominated for a MOBO for it. And we'd heard we were going to be nominated for a MOBO, but we thought we'd be nominated for a community MOBO. When it came out, we were nominated as a gospel MOBO. So
knowing what we knew from working in the schools and how nervous they were about faith, we decided to withdraw from the MOBO because it was far more important to be dealing with kids in schools and addressing gun and knife crime than it was just to win an award. So we pulled out. It was then picked up by the news, and then people were like, are you not proud of your faith because of that? Because you pulled out of the Gospel MOBO Award. And it was like, actually, it wasn't that. For us, the most important thing was we had a message that we wanted to deliver to young people, and we didn't want that to be confused within it. Unfortunately, all the furore that kind of kicked up around that meant that schools stopped booking our anti-gun crime tour. And it went from being booked months in advance to actually us having to rename it because of what happened around that. Because people's perception, especially within the mainstream, or especially in things like schooling, is that there is an evangelical nature attached to gospel. So that's where it becomes difficult or problematic, and that was something that really was difficult for us to be able to navigate, because our main cause was to affect change and inspire. And the connection of the gospel tab, and it wasn't just us. Actually, what happened that year was a number of other gospel artists lost their ability to be in schools because they were all, a number of them were nominated on that same award. So it just to give a little bit of an understanding. But I would say, but having said all of that, I've always believed that gospel has two sides. I believe that there should be a voice that sings to the church and to the community, using our language, using the phrases that we use, using the biblical references that we use that inspire, that allow us to sing about our faith and our love of our Lord, essentially.
Okay.
There is also an opposite side. In my crew, we used to call it like plainclothes policemen and uniform policemen. They both have the same authority, but they achieve different things. And I think if you are working outside of the Christian community, especially if you're looking to have a career financially and work within that market, you have to approach things slightly differently.
Steve, I want to come back to you because for me, having moved from British Black gospel to UK gospel music, and dropping the Black in itself, especially now that we're looking at this social justice, racial injustice, should we continue with a descriptor that doesn't carry the name of our community, and how can that be perceived if we drop the Black gospel name?
Well, just to answer your question, if I had to reproduce the book, if I get around to it, a second volume, it will be British Black Gospel 2. I'm embracing British Black and Gospel. Why do we want to change? Do we want to change because of fashion? Do we want to change because of marketing? Recently, Bazil Meade received, congratulations, Bazil, received an MBE for his contribution to gospel in this country. Okay? The mainstream, got to give him a bit of a chance to catch up. If the term gospel is going to change, we may have to leave it to the younger generation. Recently, as you know, grime has exploded. Nobody in the grime industry, as far as I'm concerned, debated about changing their name. When grime was unfashionable, when grime was something that was associated with crime, ignored, they pushed on and they produced a Stormzy. Maybe we should embrace and just push on with this. Now, in terms of Black gospel, it could be down to euphemism. Saying that, if you mention gospel in this country to the mainstream media, they think you're talking about Black singers. Yes, but let's push on with this. And just I noticed earlier on somebody mentioned lyrical content. As far back as the 80s, band Paradise, which Bazil mentioned, pushed out an instrumental single in their album. You have spoken word, so you have different expressions of gospel. Maybe we've got gospel, Commonwealth related type gospel. We need to accept that our type of gospel is eclectic. Okay, we're in a multicultural society, so you know what, we've achieved a lot. Okay, we've achieved a lot in terms of NDEs. We've achieved a lot in terms of the mobile, for example. It's unfortunate Wisdom had to drop for marketing purposes or But the Mongols still recognize us as black gospel. So I think we have to be careful about dropping definitions. I mean, gospel itself is like a word that goes back 200 years before Thomas Dorsey actually used the word to connect with religious music. So, you know what? Let's embrace what we have. Let's be proud, let's push on, and the younger generation will probably call it something completely different.
Well, I'm looking at black gospel as a term, but also as a style that has been carried throughout the world, and we have choirs all over the world singing black gospel, sometimes US version, all over the world, and we have choirs like the Oslo Gospel Choir, who formed in 1988, who tour the world every year, and who result in annual sales of $50 million in sales in 2018. Quite a considerable amount of money, which, whilst they are using black gospel music, the choir itself is predominantly white. Are we going to continue to allow the white counterpart to use our music, make money from it, and still not give back to our community? Bazil, what do you say? Sorry, just a minute. I think you're muted. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, am I up?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big challenge because there are many considerations in that. The Oslo Gospel Choir has been doing great for many years. They do quite a lot of covers, but they also write their own material, and it's a white, blonde-eyed group singing gospel, doing very well. It's the support they have. It's the marketing. And I've listened to the choir, I've seen them perform. They perform gospel songs without changing lyrics. They also perform some message songs that are not necessarily gospel, but the same choral sound. I think we in black gospel in UK must learn how to market and spend more time learning how to market what we do. And I think for us to lose gospel, the title gospel, I mean, when you say black gospel, it identifies immediately who is presenting the music. And it's about saying what is in the tin. I think we have done a lot down through the years, assimilating into the white communities. We need to keep certainly definitely keeping our identity stronger and make it stronger, and just find a different way of presenting it to our audiences so they can understand. As Wisdom has said, you need to use a different language when you're not in the church setting. You're singing or performing to a non-church audience, your language, your vocabulary needs to be different. Your presentation needs to be different, because they will not understand the type of words you use in church, and people get scared and a bit terrified. If they saw what goes on in church, they would run out the doors. So we need to find a different way of presenting our music when it's in a secular or to a secular audience. And I certainly have learned that down to the years. They're very, very important. The material you present when you're with a secular audience will be different to what you do in a worship setting. I think we've got to wear those two caps. If you want to be successful, you've got to do that, because you probably will find more, in terms of doing secular gigs, you might find more people at your gigs because of that. It's an area that we struggle quite a lot here in the UK, is getting support for what we do, so we can have our really successful artists at the top and reaching audience of all cultures and so forth. But it's a challenge. It's a big challenge for us. Marketing is an essential part of it. Yeah, the product, the marketing of the product, and aiming it in the right places, and chopping and changing what we need to do to suit the audiences we're going to perform. The religious side of what we do will always give a problem to the non-church people. It will always be a problem. I found that down through the years. As soon as you say Christian or gospel, there's a different attitude to you. But I suppose LCGC has a reputation for performing the way that we do. We can do the Glastonbury stages, we can do the Jazz Cafe, we can do all the different secular. We've done many blues festivals throughout Europe, jazz festivals. So when we go on the stage and we come up, they will know definitely what our styling is. And I think I stand by that. It's because I change the way we perform to a secular audience, and the material more likely that will perform the secular audience. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Bazil. Sandra, Bazil touched on we should improve our marketing, we should improve the way that we speak when we try and market our music outside. How can UK Black Gospel present itself in a way that would help us put our message out there?
Well, you know me, I'm one for not shying away from things. I think we should apologize to our public. Often I do before I start singing, and someone might laugh at that, but I think we have had our message misrepresented because of bad, unthought through language. And I will ask lots of white people, what do you think gospel music is? And maybe that's something we should all be asking. And often they'll say, it just makes me feel good. I have no idea what you're singing about. No idea. I can't get to that level. Really makes me feel good. And 9 times out of 10 people say that. I stand there and I have to apologize on behalf of the Black community. That might be a bit out of my place, but we've got it wrong. And there's a subtlety in this sword that we've been carrying on for so long. You know, we understand our background, what we've been through. It's been terrible, slavery, all that. But it's a case of who are we singing to? What are those laments about? And is it appropriate that in the audience that we're singing to, in a bar, in a club, that they have to go back to how bad it was in the olden days? Maybe they just need a song that will inspire them to go to work or to be good to their wives and their children. And I know that we are best placed to do that. Gospel music is a genre that can be copied. And because it can be copied, it means anybody can sing it. The last time I went to Nashville, I sat with a producer and he said, you know, we've got so many secular artists who are writing Christian and gospel songs. And I said, what? He said, yeah, they've learned how we as Christians write our songs. They know how to draw out the emotion and they're making the money out of it. Yeah. I got back on that plane and I thought, something's wrong. So it's good to be inward looking. I love what we do in the church. I've been a Christian since whatever, but I've realized we're just singing to ourselves, which is lovely. The world out there has no idea what we're trying to interpret, and marketing is huge, and I could talk about that for hours. Yeah.
I want to bring in wisdom. In what you said, I hear that there is, within gospel, there is 2 strands that we need to be careful of when we go out and when we want to market our music. The gospel sound and it's a gospel music that we do that is for the church, inward looking, that carries all the terms and language that we know for the church. And for me, that will be gospel church music. That's my term. It's not written anywhere. And then you have the gospel inspirational music that we produce that goes out, reaches the lost, and speaks to the world of finding hope and strength in Jesus Christ. Is that correct, Wisdom?
Yeah, as I said, I've always seen it as there being sort of 2 sides to it. But I think I want to step back slightly because I think there is an issue with Black music in general in regards to what I would say infrastructure. And what I would say about that is if you look, going back through time, we created rock and roll, we created jazz, we created house music, we created hip hop, we created drum and bass, we created a whole heap of different genres. But usually what we did was we created it out of a place of passion. We didn't then put any infrastructure in behind it. So what happened with jazz was that some amazingly talented people came up with these incredible different ways of displaying music, and then they eventually died out. And what happened was people took it up and went, right, let's create jazz standards because we don't know how to do that. And they went into the intricacies and they worked out how they did it, and then they taught jazz. And jazz kind of became known as a white music. It wasn't seen as Black music until recently. And that's happened with hip hop. That's happened with drum and bass. I'm currently talking to a number of drum and bass labels who've only just realized that all of the artists on their label are white. and they just did a remix of a Jetstar album and didn't have any black artists, drum and bass artists, to make the music. It's a similar sort of thing within gospel. We've had some successful artists, usually who've had to be successful on their own and find a way to succeed, but they've not come from a systematic way of support that allows them to continue that success amongst other people and continue to own that. So what happens is people who do understand infrastructure go, right, I can see what you're doing. You put this chord here and you do this here and you sing at this point. So I'm going to do that. If you listen to Hillsong, for example, there's an awful lot of Coldplay sounding stuff in Hillsong. And you could say, did Coldplay get that from them, or did Hillsong get that from Coldplay? Because once you create a system, it means that you can control the passion and the creativity. If you just keep making music without putting down any roots, without putting down any infrastructure, without doing that, what happens is someone else comes along, sees that, takes it, puts the infrastructure in, and they succeed with it. And I think that that's the place where we've been at for a while. And I know for myself, I went into the mainstream music industry because I wanted to learn how to make those systems so that my community could benefit from them rather than being victims of them continuously.
So is it time for us to now start defining UK gospel, defining Black British gospel, writing out the standards, writing down the signatures, agreeing the distinctive, and making this our own sound, and then being able to market this to the public? What do we say, Lady T?
Well, I think people should just continue doing what they're doing. And I think one of the things that's going to, the only way that UK music or UK gospel, if you don't want to call it UK gospel,
we're letting you the network quite bad.
Music, the best way.
Let me leave you for a second while you move to another position. And I'm going to ask that question to Bazil, who has quite a lot of experience. Is it time for us, Bazil, to, while Lady T moves position and so that we can hear her better, is it time for us to lay down the distinctive so that we have a genre that is well defined, not only to society, but also to musicologists and everybody out there who plays music, so that we have a clear standard of what British Black gospel sounds like?
Again, I think that's going to be a very difficult thing, because we are African, from the mainland Africa, from the continent. We're Caribbean people coming from many different islands again. So the cultures coming together to assimilate and create a music culture that is identified solely as the unique gospel style of UK is a challenging thing. It's quite difficult. America, they're all Americans, and it's the same people. But here we are having to culturally try to get an understanding, a way of working together and creating a music that we identify. Now, well, it's the population, the Black population has come so tight and close together that you can hardly tell these days who is from the Caribbean, who's from Africa, or various places like that. So musically, it's to find that particular styling that we can all recognize. I mean, assemble groups of people together to sing and have a skillful choir lead, a choir conductor who will get those people singing and sound like a gospel choir. By the way, the voices are blended together and the styling of the harmonies. And that's a sound that people recognize easily. House choir, they're singing on house beats, and yet you hear the gospel choir sound on top of it.
So you're able to define what those genres are, but why is it that we are not able to have the distinctive? down and the standards down of what UK gospel is. And I think Lady T is back with us, so we're going to take that. She's going to take that question for me. If all the other genre have been able to put down the standards of their music, why is it that we're still waiting to do this for the UK sound or the UK Black gospel sound?
I don't think there's the UK gospel sound. I don't know how to describe it. It's just it's definitely not American.
You think it's a melting pot?
I think it is a melting pot of sounds. It really, really is. I can't put my finger and say this is what UK gospel sounds like, because there's no distinct sound. It's just really the sounds that the artists create these days. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And then when you get some American artists, because I have to admit, some of the artists can be quite ignorant when it comes to the UK sound. Like, you know, they don't understand it. But it's just like, because American sound is so superior, that's what everybody does. So everything else, oh, I don't understand, I don't get. No, you don't get it because it's not American. We're not the same as you. Do you get what I mean? And the UK sound is just different. It's just, like you said, it is a melting pot of a lot of different styles and different genres, which I think is which is brilliant, you know. And I've been in conversations, and I've seen conversations even when it comes to the rap thing, you know, the way the UK rap do their thing, you know, it takes them from American influences, but then when you're hearing the Americans listen to it, it's like, oh, they don't get it. Well, it's rap. What's not to get? It's just a different sound. It's not American sound, because again, America has to be like the superior leader in what the sound is meant to be like, but it's not at all. And I think someone mentioned earlier, the only way that like any artist in the UK is going to get their music heard is switching up how you write your music. Write whatever you're writing, switch up, knowing where you're coming from, knowing your foundation, switch up the lyrics, switch up how you present your songs so that it can transcend in mainstream and still be in gospel as well, because you're hitting both things. So it's all about how you write. But the sound is just I can't put my finger on it, if I'm being honest. It's just the way it is.
It's just the way it is. Is that correct, Sandra? Is it just the way it is? As a radio presenter who gets to hear a lot of the UK music, do you think you agree with Lady T?
To a point, but I would listen to hundreds of artists who send their music through gospel. They call themselves gospel artists, and for a lot of them, they follow a pattern of opening their songs. You know, if I could tell you how many sets of songs where the leader, the first few seconds on the song is everybody stand up and clap, let's all praise the Lord, and it's the same words that they use. And I kid you not, we've sat in audition songs, song after song after song, choir leaders said, let's stand up and praise the Lord, let's clap our hands. So there's this repetitiveness that actually just turns people off, because they can't expect anything more. I think we should be thinking about what is the message of our music and who is it for, and how do we get that music across. And I think when you work that out, you can define what UK gospel music is. Because if we are answering questions that aren't being answered outside in the world, then we will be irrelevant. And I think our pathway into the secular world, or the world outside, is to ask, what do you need? And write the songs that are appropriate for the needs of the people outside of our church. Yes, keep the songs in the church that we need to praise God. He wants to hear our praises. But what questions are being asked outside in society? And let's be that answer. And that's what I think gospel music has a unique place for in the society. And because UK gospel can do that, we can answer our UK questions. Well, our questions here in this country are different to in America. Let's answer the questions here to our music. And that's what I feel gospel music can do. If that makes sense. I hope that does to everybody.
Yes, thank you. Wisdom, listening to Sandra, I see you nodding. Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that one of the things I also need to add to this is that we have to remember that the US and the UK are the biggest English-speaking media outlets in the world. As it was said before, I remember as a comparison to the US market, I remember being in TD Jakes' car park and thinking I could sell 35,000 CDs just standing in this car park. There is no UK church I can do that in here. And what I think has happened, what I see happening and moving forward is that there are many more groups who are going into the mainstream that aren't necessarily advertising their Christian faith, but their music is doing the speaking for them. And I think what Sandra said about, it's about the way it makes people feel. I think that that's a really, really important thing for us to grasp. When I was talking before about, defining the sound, I meant less than it has to sound a specific way or it needs to be specifically like a choir, for example. I meant more having the companies and the support in place, having the infrastructures of training, having not people knowing where they need to go to get distribution, having marketing companies who understand different markets and understand how to do playlisting on Spotify for different genres in different places. These are the things that have grown other types of music in other audiences. And we no longer live in a world where we sell CDs. So we have to interact with it differently. And I think that that's the change that I know I joined GMIA to hopefully start to make and set down some of those, that infrastructure in place, because I think that is what makes it sustainable. And as long as we as the support from whence the music comes from, knows that it's gospel, I think that's the important thing. People will feel whether it's gospel.
Thank you so much. Steve, your last word before we end the program. It seems like online and through this discussion that British Black Gospel, as you described your book, is the title for all gospel music produced in the UK. And then it seems to be cutting itself into subgenre of Afro, reggae, hip hop, etc. Do you think this is the terminology that we should go with from today?
I think one of these days we're going to wake up and realize that that's what makes it British gospel. The fact that it's varied, the fact that you can't quite put it down to a single definition. Also, I don't want to contradict myself, but as I said, I've got a 16-year-old son. And after he flicked through my book, he says, "Dad, you forgot to include grime drill." Again, artists that are on the cutting edge, what do they call themselves? So I think for purposes of simplicity, we need to just hang on. Also, question of education as well. The books out there, several books out there. Bazil Meade's written a book, Viv Broughton's written a book, Les Moore. There are books out there. So I think it's down to the general public to educate themselves first. As far as I'm concerned, stepping back into mainstream mode, we're gospel in terms of delivering our messages, whether in terms of lyrics, whether in terms of the message that we want to put across there. They see us as gospel. So nothing wrong with that. Embrace that. Don't be looking into semantics, changing definitions. Look more in developing the infrastructure, as Wisdom said. And as Lady T said, there's a mixture of music out there. Embrace it.
Well, thank you so much. Before I say goodbye to everybody, I want to take one more question to Bazil. And this one is, should we return to our roots of carrying the Black label, especially in this time of racial injustice, where we want to define ourselves by our culture, by our roots, our origin, and also by the background and the history that we carry with us? Is it time to bring back the label Black Gospel?
I think that's a the central part of this structure that Wisdom is talking about. I think having a label or labels that are concerned with promoting Black gospel music in particular is a central part. We need to have people who understand not just the music, but the people behind the music and the whole culture of the community where it's coming from. There needs to be a strong connection with that. So yes, we need to have the Black labels that will take the artists on board and develop them, give them guidance, in terms of a lot of the stuff we've been talking about earlier. But it's important to be true to our roots. I'm very much into that. I think we cannot whitewash who we are. We should not do that. At the same time, we need to keep open mind so we can embrace new ways, new influences that we can incorporate into what we are doing. Because we, in as much as we learn from American brothers and sisters, we have our own identity, and we are pretty open-minded when it comes to that. Britain has been known to have great ideas, innovative ideas of making music and other things, and then other people might take the ideas and do other things with them. But we must be true to who we are. It's essential part of going where we want to go.
Thank you so much, Bazil. Well, we are coming to the end of our program and looking at the theme that we were discussing today. What on earth is UK gospel music? Well, it would seem that gospel music is a genre on its own. In the UK, it brings many subtitles, sub-genre under its own window. It should be called Black gospel because it is rooted in the background of the spiritual Black gospel music from America, but also carries the Britishness of our music because it speaks the message of the Black community in the UK. It speaks about our struggles here in the UK, and therefore it is Black, it is British, and it is definitely a gospel sound that talks about the freedom and the deliverance that we have in Christ. Well, today I think we have come to some kind of conclusion as to what our music here in the UK should be labeled as, but you're more than welcome to send me messages on Facebook and also on YouTube and let me know what your thoughts were about this discussion. I want to say thank you to all of my guests today. Wisdom, thank you so much. Sandra Godley from Coventry, thank you so much. Steve Alexander, thank you so much. Bazil Meade, thank you so much. And Lady T in the house, thank you so much for joining the program. You can watch this on replay if you've missed some of the program today. It will be on Facebook and on YouTube live. And please do connect with LCBN TV. We are the new Black Christian network, TV and radio. So please join us, watch our programs, and make sure you share and tell all your friends and family about us so that we can also build our community. Well, until next week, we'll be going back to Roundtable, and next week we'll be discussing the church and racial injustice part 3. Tune in with Rev Faith. Until next week, take care of yourself.
Bye-bye.
Lifecom Broadcasting Network TV, aka LCBN TV, is committed to bringing the transformation message of Jesus Christ into homes across the world, providing hope in the most desperate situations. We are passionate about souls, reaching the lost, the hurt, and the lonely, and by a click of a button, God can change a person's life forever. Watch LCBN TV channel 24/7 on UK Freeview channel 271, Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, Android TV, Apple TV, See Love World, Google TV, LCBNTV.com, LifecomTV.com. Download LCBN TV app from Google Play and App Store. LCBN